The morning in Greenwich began with its usual tranquility. Catherine Morrison prepared Sunday breakfast while enjoying the sunlight streaming through the enormous windows. The table was already set with dishes made with fresh ingredients, carefully chosen at Whole Foods. There were French toast with a touch of maple syrup, organic yogurt with seasonal berries, and freshly ground coffee that gave off a delicious aroma. This ritual had remained intact throughout her decade of marriage. David Coffey always responded to her call. Her husband came down the stairs with his busy man air, despite his great responsibility as director of marketing at Harrison & Global. However, Sundays were reserved for family, or at least that's how it appeared. He wore a cashmere sweater from Brooks Brothers, the epitome of the successful businessman. "Thanks, Kat," he said, giving her a kiss on the cheek before taking his usual seat by the window. Outside, the city of Greenwich awoke in a light mist. It was Sunday, a familiar scene. In the evening, her sister April and her parents would gather after the service at the First Presbyterian Church. Sharing Catherine's home-cooked meal was a long-standing tradition. From appetizers to dessert, her dedication to making everything from scratch had always been a source of admiration. April had found success as an influencer with over 500,000 followers on Instagram. Her posts showcased her glamorous life in a luxurious Manhattan apartment, sparking envy among her fans. Hermès bags, Cartier jewelry, and the latest Gucci collections adorned her feed, always setting trends. Her parents, George and Mary Parker, were a prominent family in Greenwich. As key members of the First Presbyterian Church and the exclusive Greenwich Country Club, they wielded considerable social influence and organized local charity events. George's deep voice stood out in the Sunday choir, while Mary played a central role in the church's Women's Association. The family mansion, located in one of the most exclusive residential areas, maintained the traditions of old New England. In the impeccably manicured garden, the roses that Mary so lovingly tended bloomed proudly. Neighborhood children would pass by on holidays, hoping to receive Grandma Catherine's famous homemade cookies. Catherine, for her part, was an intelligent and successful financial consultant, with a salary of over $1 million a year as a senior partner at an accounting firm. Despite her demanding career, she managed to perfectly balance her family life and her volunteer work at Sunday school. Her reputation as the perfect woman preceded her. She met all expectations both at home and at work. Catherine's social media was filled with cherished memories. Family trips to Paris, wine tastings in Tuscany, ski vacations in the Alps. The Morrison Parker family was admired both in the church community and at charity events. "For tonight's dinner, I prepared Provençal roast pork," she informed her husband. "It's April's favorite dish. I also chose a good wine yesterday," she added with a smile. David nodded. "Your cooking is always the best." After breakfast, David went to his study. Catherine watched him walk away as she began preparing everything for dinner. The changes began in late spring. David started coming home later. Gradually, the phrase "a new project in the Asia-Pacific region" became a recurring theme in their dinner conversations. Each night, Catherine would see him in his study, carefully reviewing emails, his face illuminated by the dim light of the monitor, looking tense, anxious. "Are you okay?" she asked him on several occasions. "Oh, it's just the time difference," he would reply. What used to be followed by "you should rest too" was no longer there. Small changes accumulated. A new Patek Philippe watch appeared on David's wrist. He said it was a thank you gift from a client. But Catherine knew he had never shown any interest in luxury Swiss watches. That watch seemed to have been chosen for someone else. His closet began to fill with more modern suits, youthful designs that had nothing to do with his classic Brooks Brothers style. Tom Ford, Saint Laurent and Dior brands he had never paid attention to before suddenly became his favorites. He started going to the gym frequently, drinking protein shakes, canceling his weekend golf games. "I'm just trying to take better care of my health," he said without further explanation. But Catherine knew something else was going on. Catherine felt something strange in her husband's tone when he said that. The changes didn't seem casual, but intentional, as if he was trying to impress someone. Even his choice of lotion changed, and sometimes after work meetings, there were faint traces of makeup foundation on his shirt collar. Meanwhile, April also began to behave strangely. She increasingly canceled Sunday family dinners with excuses like, I have an important event with the brand, or there's an emergency meeting with influencers. However, on those same days, she wouldn't post anything new on her social media. The frequency of her posts had decreased noticeably. Instead of photos at glamorous parties or selfies in designer clothes, she now posted quiet moments at her parents' house, all with a forced vibe. Mom and Dad haven't been feeling well lately. I want to spend more time at home. Every time she said it, she avoided Catherine's gaze. But when Catherine visited on weekends, her parents seemed healthier and more energetic than ever. The credit card statement showed increasingly expensive purchases. Cartier, Tiffany. Every time Catherine saw those brands, she couldn't help but wonder how much money her parents were spending to maintain April's lifestyle. Her influence on Instagram was waning, and to make matters worse, she was going to church less and less. She no longer attended Sunday services or participated in charity events. Her parents justified it with, "She's been very busy with work," but their tone sounded forced. Then came the decisive moment. "It's a business trip to launch a new project in Hawaii," David announced. He would be gone for 2 weeks. What most disturbed Catherine was his attitude. Her husband, who usually packed light, this time had bought a new Louis Vuitton suitcase. Checking it briefly, she noticed something that chilled her to the bone. A flashy Hawaiian shirt, as if he was preparing for a vacation at a luxury resort. "Don't worry, I'll be back soon," he said in an unusually sweet tone. Catherine felt a chill. His farewell sounded more guilty than affectionate. Even the way he stepped on the doormat as he left had a light, almost carefree air. That same day, a message arrived from April. "I'll be busy for a while. A new business opportunity came up. Mom and Dad are going to help too." Catherine read the message over and over again. Something didn't add up. She decided to check her sister's social media, something she rarely did. David's business trip announcement, April's sudden busyness, her parents' involvement, it all began to fit together in a sinister way. The discovery was accidental. She found a private secondary account with few followers and discreet posts. But what she saw there chilled her heart. Family photos at a luxury resort in Hawaii, breakfasts at the Moana Surfrider, exclusive dinners at La Mer. David, her parents, and April. In every photo, her sister clung to her husband as if he were her lover. With trembling hands, she opened the airline mileage confirmation screen. First-class tickets for 4 people, flight reservations to Hawaii, luxury hotel confirmation emails. Everything had been paid for with her money. The betrayal had even been financed with her own assets. Catherine turned off the computer. Outside, the sun was beginning to set. She stood up silently and walked to the closet. She took out a suitcase and began packing the essentials: a suit, identification documents, and the collection of evidence she had gathered over the years. Her expression no longer showed surprise or pain, only an implacable calm. She opened the airline app and made a reservation to coincide with her husband's return flight. Revenge had to be perfect. "I'll be the one to welcome you home," she whispered softly in the dark room. Through the window, Catherine's reflection was drawn against the Manhattan skyline. "Mrs. Morrison, we've been expecting you." James Sterling, one of the best divorce lawyers in the country, greeted her at the reception on the top floor. Behind him, the New York skyline stretched beyond the windows. "Could you tell me more about your case?" Catherine carefully took out the evidence she had prepared piece by piece and placed it on the table. USB drives, printed photos, flight reservation records, and credit card statements. Sterling reviewed the documents carefully. Impressive collection of evidence. His gaze lingered on the social media records. "In particular, this is perfect." Catherine maintained her composure as she spoke. "After 10 years of marriage, for the first time, I suspected my husband's betrayal. But I never imagined that my sister and my own parents would be involved." Sterling nodded silently. "The first thing will be to protect your assets." From that day, meticulous legal preparation began. The first step was to secure control over the bank accounts. Funds were moved from joint accounts and new individual accounts were opened. Investment assets were also protected, placing them out of David's reach. Another urgent point was to confirm property rights. The house in Greenwich had been inherited from Catherine's paternal grandfather, which meant it could be claimed as premarital property with full rights. "Prepare to freeze all credit cards," Sterling instructed. But let's wait until the last moment to make sure the blow lands squarely. The evidence gathering continued with greater precision. Specialists were hired to preserve digital evidence. Social media posts, email exchanges, location records, all saved in unalterable formats. An assistant entered the room with a new file in hand. Here's the material obtained from Harrison Global's accounting department. Sterling took it and read aloud. We found serious irregularities in David Morrison's expense reports. Fictitious business trips, inflated entertainment costs, and personal purchases disguised as business expenses. The fraud amounts to 6 figures. The IT specialist also revealed information about April Parker. We've confirmed over $5 million in debt in the last 6 months. Everything indicates it's due to a drastic drop in her income after losing influence on social media. Catherine reviewed her sister's accounts. Her followers had dropped dramatically. Contracts with trendy brands were at risk. Sponsorships were being canceled silently. I'm also worried about my parents' financial situation, Catherine whispered. The results were shocking. The mansion in Greenwich already had significant mortgages. The country club membership was 3 months overdue. They had even stopped making donations to the church. A perfect strategy requires allies, said Sterling. The first contact was with Harrison Global. The CEO, Mrs. Maureen Brown, listened seriously as the CFO, Thomas Hamilton, reviewed the information. I understand the situation, she said with a frown. David Morrison's actions represent a serious compliance problem for our company. The next step was with the Human Resources Department. His promotion will be frozen immediately, announced Janet Smith. We are also preparing the appropriate disciplinary action. The net was beginning to close. Key clients on the Asia-Pacific Committee were discreetly informed about the situation. Many relied on Catherine's expertise as an accounting consultant. Contact with the brands associated with April was handled with great care. This is a problem that affects our brand image, declared a representative of a luxury firm. We are already ready for contract termination. The director of the advertising agency agreed. Her influence is no longer reliable. We were waiting for a reason to proceed. The ripples of this scandal spread silently through the church community. Mr. and Mrs. Parker's actions go against our values, said the pastor seriously. Unfortunately, the committee is prepared to take appropriate action. Finally, the media response strategy was planned. We want to avoid sensationalist coverage, Sterling advised cautiously. Catherine nodded slowly. I understand. But they must face definitive social sanctions. Photographs were carefully selected as evidence for local reporters, ensuring the most effective sanction against families who valued their prestige in high society. The final touch. The confrontation at the airport. Meticulous details were coordinated. The exact location of the security monitors, the strategic positioning of each person involved. Everything proceeded according to a perfect plan. 72 hours before the scheduled arrival, Sterling made a final check. Ma'am, are you sure about this method? Catherine looked out the window before answering. Yes. This is how betrayal is repaid. In the Manhattan twilight, the final preparations continued. Arrivals Hall, JFK International Airport. Catherine waited impeccably in a white Alexander McQueen suit, her makeup meticulously applied. In her hands, she held a bouquet of dark red roses, exactly the same variety she carried on her wedding day 10 years ago. Around her, the positions were already established. To the left, the corporate team. The CFO of Global Executives, Thomas Hamilton, stood with his arms crossed, his expression impenetrable. Beside him, the sales director, James Walker, conversed in a low voice with 3 key clients from the Asia-Pacific region. Next to them, Janet Smith, the Human Resources Director, held the disciplinary dismissal documents. To the right, April's work circle. The Chanel representative watched the arrivals gate with a cold expression. Beside him, the representatives of Gucci and Hermes had contract termination notices. Further back, the creative director of the advertising agency was already swiping photos on his phone, evaluating the new campaign model. In the center, the community that had once embraced them. Representatives from the First Presbyterian Church were present. Pastor Jonathan Williams had a sad expression. Members of the church committee sighed with resignation. repeating prayers in low voices. Even members of the Greenwich Country Club were there, lifelong acquaintances. But on their faces there was only pain at witnessing that day. On the lobby monitors, the flight information appeared in large letters. Catherine reviewed everything one last time. Beside her, James Sterling inspected the legal documents before saying softly, "All preparations are complete." The clock struck 4 p.m. An announcement resonated through the lobby. Flight AA-382 arriving shortly. Catherine took a deep breath, straightened her back even further and waited. 15 minutes later, the automatic doors opened, and the passengers began to appear. Laughter echoed in the arrivals hall. April's voice was heard first. "What an incredible trip," she commented enthusiastically while holding a new Hermes bag. "It really was a wonderful vacation," added Mary Parker, her mother, carrying shopping bags from luxury brands in both hands. "I hope we can do it again next month." George Parker, her father, followed, pulling out a designer golf bag. "Yes, but next time we have to try another resort," he said carelessly. David Morrison's voice joined the conversation. On his wrist, a new Patek Philippe watch gleamed. The four of them walked with radiant smiles after their trip, until they stopped short. Their faces froze when they saw her. Catherine slowly walked towards them with a bouquet of dark red roses in her hands. "Welcome." Her voice sounded abnormally calm. David immediately lost all color. April hugged her bag against her chest. Her parents were speechless. Catherine shifted her gaze to the airport monitors. "Let's start with the chronology." The large screen lit up and images began to play. Last year's Christmas party, David and April meeting secretly, away from prying eyes. December 24th, while I was working late. Catherine's voice sounded icy. Immediately, images from the security camera of a luxury hotel showed David and April checking in at different times, then scenes of them together in restaurants. All meticulously documented. Catherine turned her face to her sister. "April, I heard you have a debt of $5 million. That's why you approached him. You were so desperate because your contracts were about to expire." The monitor now displayed April's financial documents. Excerpts of her debts, emails about crises and contract renewals, multiple notices of non-payment, and a graph showing the plummet of her followers on social media. April's face turned ashen. Catherine turned to David. "Were you feeling the pressure of your promotion? A midlife crisis?" On the screen appeared internal emails, false records of business trips, inflated entertainment expenses. All the evidence of his corporate fraud. David staggered and had to lean against the wall. Then Catherine turned to her parents. "And you, why did you help them? Did you really think you could trample on my life without consequences?" A deathly silence fell over the lobby. The first to break it was Thomas Hamilton, the CFO of Global Executives, who stepped forward with a stern expression. "David Morrison is officially dismissed." The clients from the Asia-Pacific region immediately spoke up. "We will terminate all contracts, effective immediately." Janet Smith, the Human Resources Director, presented the documents. Disciplinary dismissal without retirement benefits. Then the representatives of the luxury brands turned their gaze to April. "Contract termination is effective as of today. There is no possibility of restoring your image." Pastor Jonathan Williams looked at the Parkers sadly. "The church committee has already made its decision. You will be expelled from the congregation." And finally, the president of the Greenwich Country Club pronounced his verdict. "Your withdrawal from the club has been unanimously approved." The cold voices of the charity committee added the final blow. "All your hosting rights have been revoked." The blood seemed to drain completely from the four of them. David collapsed to his knees. April burst into tears. Her parents stood motionless in a state of shock. At that precise moment, the local media photographers fired their flashes, capturing the exact moment a high society family was shattered. Catherine stood still for a moment. Then, with absolute calm, she dropped the bouquet of roses to the floor. The dark red petals scattered over the airport's gleaming marble as the hem of her white suit swayed elegantly. "This is the price of betraying me," she whispered. She turned and walked away with her head held high. Behind her, only the remains of a ruined family and rose petals scattered on the floor remained. 1 year later, from her office on the 57th floor, Catherine observed the city through the large window. On her desk, a plaque gleamed proudly. Outstanding Accountant of the Year 2024. That day at the airport marked the beginning of her new life. David's fall was swift and brutal. After his disciplinary dismissal from Harrison Global, no company wanted to hire him. His fraud with inflated expenses became a scandal within the industry, leaving him with no job options. In addition, the court ordered him to pay considerable alimony. Without a stable income, he had to give up his luxurious apartment in Manhattan. Rumors say he now lives in an old apartment in the Bronx, surviving with temporary jobs. "Miss Parker, your ex-husband has tried to contact you," her secretary murmured one day. Catherine barely reacted. She simply shook her head. "He's not relevant in my life." April's fall was equally humiliating. Her influence on social media completely disappeared. Her follower count plummeted below 100,000. One by one, her contracts with luxury brands were canceled. No company wanted to associate its image with that of a disgraced socialite. Rumors say she had to leave her elegant Manhattan apartment and now lives in a shared house in Brooklyn. Her life of glamour and exclusivity was a thing of the past. "April wants to talk to you. She's seeking reconciliation," her lawyer said on the phone. Catherine replied calmly, "It's not necessary." The fate of her parents was even more tragic. Expelled from the church, completely excluded from high society, forced to disappear from charity circles. To pay their debts, they sold the mansion in Greenwich. Now, it is said, they survive on a modest pension in a small town in Connecticut. One day, Catherine's secretary informed her that a letter had arrived from her mother. Catherine took it silently and slid it into the paper shredder without hesitation. After the airport, Catherine's life had taken on a new glow. She moved to the Upper East Side of Manhattan and founded her own accounting consulting firm. Her expertise became more valued than ever, and Parker Consulting quickly became the most trusted firm on Wall Street. She also built a solid life in her new community. She participated in activities at Central Park Church, supported scholarships for children, and donated to environmental protection organizations. Everything spoke of her new way of life. When a publisher proposed writing a book about her scandal, she politely declined the offer. Let's let the past remain in the past. In her free time, she enjoyed running in Central Park, spending time at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and sometimes going to see a Broadway musical. Above all, she had regained her peace of mind. "Are you happy?" a close friend asked her at a dinner party. Catherine smiled peacefully. Yes, perhaps for the first time in the true sense of the word. Her desk was full of plans for the next month. Opening the new branch in London, International Accounting Symposium in Paris, vacation in Milan. "Miss Parker, the meeting is about to begin," her secretary announced. Catherine stood up gracefully. Through the window, Manhattan was beginning to light up with the evening lights. The traders of the past spent their days repentant in their respective corners of life. But for Catherine, life was just beginning. "Please prepare the materials for the new project," she ordered as she walked with a firm step towards the conference room. There were no longer shadows of the past behind her. High in the night sky, the full moon shone over Manhattan, illuminating a new chapter. Tomorrow, once again, Catherine Parker would continue to advance to new heights, this time without fear of betrayal from anyone.